Now let's move on to the game, the Prince of Persia Forgotten Sands. This is not the first one to show up on the Xbox and PS3. There was the kind of painted version of it that took place in a different reality, kind of, than the Sands of Time universe. Mm-hmm. But this is the first one of the original trilogy that kind of carries into the next generation. Made by UbiSoft, Montreal. Uses the Assassin's Creed engine. The story of it has absolutely nothing to do with the new movie.
Nope, it's distinctly different. It's a continuing story of the first three not the first three, but the Dagger of Time story.
It you go into the castle. There's an invading army. Your brother, who is the prince. Is he the prince or the king in this?
He's the prince because he talks about how his father. He has to go back to his father. So he's the prince, but he's in charge of this area.
And he's looking for this emblem to unleash this army of the dead.
Solomon's
army to ward off these attackers, and that kind of sets the shit rolling. Yeah,
because it turned out that it wasn't Solomon's army. It was actually an army sent to kill Solomon.
Mm-hmm. Now, that's the basic gist of the story. We don't really want to give anything away. The Prince of Persia games really don't have a whole heck of a lot of deep story, but they're
enjoyable
entertaining stories.
Yes.
They're mostly about gameplay. Mm-hmm. And the gameplay is just like every other Prince of Persia game.
Yep, you jump around, you run along walls, and you kill skeletons.
Mm-hmm. There's some new powers. You have 4 kind of magic powers where fire, ice, wind, and stone. Stone is an armor. Wind knocks enemies down, and when you power up all the way, it creates like a vortex. You got fire, which you leave a trail of fire around, and ice, when you attack, it leaves a...
It shoots out a trail of ice and spikes.
So you can hit people kind of further away from you. And then there is a 5th sort of power where you can manipulate water by freezing it and turning it into platforms, turning it pillars.
Which is actually really cool.
Awesome! It's also got a weaker fighting system than the older games had. Because the older games, you can bounce off walls, you can bounce off enemies, and you can combine that stuff when you're fighting. This one's pretty much a straight-up button masher.
Yeah, well, you can jump on enemies, and you can jump on various enemies. There's actually an achievement to jump on 30 enemies at once without hitting the ground. But you can't jump off of walls. And very seldom can you actually use the environment around you unless you actually kick someone up against the wall, then attack. Then maybe he'll throw the person off the ledge, or he'll slam against the wall and stab him. Mm-hmm. I mean, the fighting could have used a little more refinement to it. But you really don't play Prince of Persia for the fighting. Mm-hmm. You play Prince of Persia for the challenging parkour shit.
Now, what is nice about the fighting, though, is they give you loads of enemies to fight and bosses. They're pretty much the same technique to kill all the little bosses. And there are Goliath bosses, really tall ones that you can fight. And it's the same pattern for all of them, but at least there are bosses.
Yeah, at least there's boss battles, which is something like a rarity today in video games for some fucked up reason.
Oh, that one pocket up my butthole.
It's got puzzles like every other one, but they're pretty mediocre puzzles. I mean, they're nothing too special, like turn a wheel, turn a crank and get some wheels moving. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sort of thing. Nothing too special. Visually, the game goes back to kind of the older art style. It doesn't do the watercolor paintings.
No, it definitely looks like the original games.
Mm-hmm. But higher resolution.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And it does get away from the stained glass look.
Mm-hmm. But I was slightly disappointed in some of the texture work. It's a little muddy in spots. I think the prince looks good. His brother looks good. So the environments look good, but the texture work in spots is just not polished enough. And I think the major problem with this game is they try to get it out with the movie, and it could have used a little more polish.
Yeah, they could have taken another 6 months, did a little more work.
And get it out with the DVD.
Yeah, they should have actually released it not when they did, considering there were so many games that came out that time, so it really hurt it.
It came out the same week as Alan Wake and Red Dead.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Retarded. Now, I had no problem with the visuals, honestly. I do think they made the prince a little too big.
What, muscular?
A little too
Even in
Chris Redfield.
Especially in the opening cinematic, which is pre-rendered and it looks incredibly good, but his face looks more like what Arnold sounded like in Conan than what the prince's voice sounds like.
I did not come here seeking a mythical army. I was sent to study alongside my brother, that someday I might be as great a leader as he is. This territory was once the heart of King Solomon's mighty empire.
You see people who do the parkour shit, they aren't bodybuilders. They're lean and wiry. And so it's like, I would have no problem if they turned the prince into, if he was lean and wiry, because that's what he does.
Well, that's what he looked like in the original game.
Yeah.
He was thin, and it looked like someone who would run around and swing on things and run around walls and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, it did not look like, he looked like a little bit smaller version of Chris Redfield in Resident Evil 5.
Mm-hmm. A little too built.
Just slightly.
You have the biggest dick I've ever seen on a man.
Thanks.
I encountered some freaking terrible bugs. You didn't see any.
I had no problem with this game. It was smooth as butter.
There's a few times where the frame rate dropped to like 3 frames a second for just a couple spots here and there. It wasn't anything like long lasting. I have no idea why it did this. There were times where the floor was supposed to collapse, but it never collapsed, so it looked like there was a floor there, and I just ran and fell right through it. There were times where I just fell through the floor for absolutely no reason. I was in a room fighting people, and all of a sudden I just fell through the floor. I mean, I can rewind time, so it's not that big a deal, but it happened twice in the same room.
See, that never happened. Nothing like that
And
ever
then
happened to me.
the worst bug in the game, which it didn't just happen to me, I actually had to look up online to find out if I had to play the entire freaking game over again, was at the end of the game, there is a spot where you're swinging on these bird things, and then there's a platform in front of you. You have to hit a button, because there's in this part of the game, there are certain platforms that existed back then that do not exist now, but you have the power to conjure them. Now, if you're supposed to hit the button before you land on the platform, or else it'll just fall through. But every time I'd hit the freaking button to create the platform, it wouldn't actually create the platform. I'd just fall to my death. So rewound time, did it again, fell to my death. Rewound time, did it until my time ran out. And then when it reloaded my last checkpoint, I was in a room I could not get out of, because the gate that was supposed to be up was not up. So I was like, am I going to have to play? Because there's no manual save. It just has an autosave feature. So if this happens to you, what you do is you go to where it saves to your console. And on the Xbox, it's in the memory systems, and then memory. Then go to the game, and then you'll see the autosave and an autosave backup. And if you delete your autosave, go into the game, continue, it'll say, couldn't load autosave, will load the backup. And then it puts you about an hour back.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have to play the whole game over again. We play about, say, 45 minutes to an hour again. But luckily, it keeps all your upgrades that you did while you played that hour. So I actually had more upgrades than I would have. So that's a little bit of a bonus for a really bad bug.
It's actually kind of a cheat, too.
A little bit. But not really, because you're still playing. I mean, there was a whole hour that I wasted playing, so.
Yeah, but you had all those extra bonuses.
Well, like 2 extra powers.
You sunk my battleship.
I never got the bugs, and I had no problem with the game. I enjoyed this game.
Like, bugs aside, I would still recommend playing the game. I don't really recommend buying it for $60.
No. If you're going to buy it, wait for it to drop in price or rent it. Because, if anything, this game is... If you're an achievement hunter, you need to get this game. Because the achievements, all of them, are doable.
I am saying it is not a compliment to call me doable.
Now, I recommend renting this game just because it's like probably 6 hours.
Yeah, it's a 6-hour game. Rent it.
Or wait till it drops to like a $40 price tag.
Don't pay full price for this game. It's not worth 6 hours for $60. It's retarded.
But that's going to do it for the special Prince of Persia edition of the Monday Media Review. Two Guys on the Couch, I'm Joe.
And I am George.
We'll see you next time here on the couch.
It is not sexy to stare at my ass and say, ooh, it must be jelly because jam don't shake like that.